So good evening, everyone. So we can start with a short breathing exercise followed by a general motivation for being here. Then we can try to think purpose of my life is not only to be happy myself, but also to be able to be as much help and benefit as much as possible to others. And the more our mind is subdued, trained, and disciplined, the more we are able to be help and benefit to others. The less delusion we have, the more positive thoughts we have, such as patience, loving kindness, compassion, wisdom, so forth, the more we are able to help others and oneself. And in order to reduce those negative thoughts and increase the positive thoughts, one need to contemplate, practice, meditate. And for that, we need to be reminded of the practices by listening, reading, reflecting, so forth. Therefore, us coming together to listen, discuss, reflect, contemplate, may all of this become cause and conditions. We encourage to inspire us to reduce those negative thoughts, increase those positive thoughts, and to achieve fully awakened state, the Buddhahood, so we can be greatest help and benefit. Okay, we can do the prayer.
Praise to the Shakyamuni Buddha, to the founder, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond the four destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, To the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. Homage to the Supreme Buddha, homage to the Dharma refuge, homage to the great Sangha, to all three ever devout homage, to all worthy of respect, bowing with bodies as many as all realms' atoms, in all aspects with supreme faith I pay homage. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions, subdue your mind thoroughly. This is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a visual aberration, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew or a bubble, a dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud. See conditioned things as such. Through these merits may sentient beings attain the rank of all-seeing, subdue the foe of faults, and be delivered from samsara's ocean, perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. The heart of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutra. I prostrate to the Arya Triple Gem. Thus did I hear at one time. The Bhagavan was dwelling on mass of Vulture's Mountain in Rajgriha, together with a great community of monks and a great community of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagavan was absorbed in the concentration on the categories of phenomena called profound perception. Also, at that time, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara looked upon the great practice of the profound perfection of wisdom and beheld those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Then, through the power of the Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara. How should any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Sharadvatiputra. Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom should look upon it like this, correctly and repeatedly beholding those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty, emptiness is form, emptiness is not other than form, form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness, without characteristic, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, not deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomenon. There is no I element, and so on, up to and including no mind element and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, and so on, up to and including no aging and death, and no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and dwell in the perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration and without fear. Having completely passed beyond error, they reach the end point of nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the three times also manifestly, completely awaken to unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment in reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequaled, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering, should be known as truth since it is not false. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is declared, Tayata, Om, Gate, Gate, Paragate, Parasamgate, Bodhi, Soha. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva should train on the profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagavan arose from that concentration and commended the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, saying, well said, son of the lineage, it is like that. It is like that. One should practice the profound perfection of wisdom just as you have indicated. Even the Tathagatas rejoiced. The Bhagavan, having thus spoken, the Venerable Sharadvatiputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, and those surrounding in their entirety, along with the world of gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, were overjoyed and highly praised that spoken by the Bhagavan. Sajipo ki Geshe Pari Sangye Jindu Mi Wai Do Nama Da Jina Chubasho Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Nidiyatayami Sangye Chodam Soki Chonam La Jangchu Patu Lani Kapsuji Dagi Chunye Nipe Sonamgi Jola Penche Sangye Gopasho Sangye Chodam Soki Chonam La Jangchu Patu Lani Kapsuji Dagi Chunye Nipe Sonamgi Jola Penche Sangye Gopasho Sangye Chodam Soki Chonam La Jangchu Padu Lani Kapsuji Dagi Chunye Nipe Sonamgi Jola Penche Sangye Gopasho
이제 두전이 전에 다른 저 방배세 담배션에 편제배 부담될 차차로 So welcome everyone. And so for the next, I don't know, maybe 6-8 weeks, we will be going through this particular text in the Praise of Dependent Originations by Lama Tsongkhapa. And Lama Tsongkhapa is one of the greatest scholar, masters, practitioners in Tibet, and who was also the founder of the Gelug lineage. And he has written many books. There are 18 volumes, both in Sutra and Tantra. And some of his early writings, you can see how much study he has done. There is a lecture setting, Sigitama, the garlands of gold. Like was well explained garlands of the gold, something like that, lecture setting, And when you read it, you can see how much study he has. He compared all the different commentaries of Indian masters, what these masters says about this particular topic or subjects or that particular statements, and what this master says. Compare all of them, and at the end, then he will come up with his own view on that. And when you see that, incredible. Those are one of his earliest writings. This is one of his later writings. Especially when it comes to the Sutra, then he also wrote what is called Tangye Lekshe Nyingpo, which is eloquent Lekshe Nyingpo, essence of eloquent, or how is it called? True eloquence. And that he explained various subtleties of different tenets, especially the mind-only schools, Siddhamatra and Madhyamika. And within the Madhyamika, there are two schools of thought. And this is because sometimes the difference are so subtle. A lot of even earlier masters in Tibet, they couldn't differentiate the differences because the differences are not so easy to understand, find. The difference are so subtlety, sometimes you wouldn't notice there is any difference between those different schools. But he point out, and so that is one of his most biggest one of contributions in his writing in Sutra. And he told Dalai Lama said, once he met one great Indian man, translator, practitioner, scholar, Upadhyaya. And I think His Holiness asked him to translate that from Tibetan to Sanskrit. He was and after he translated, Dalai Lama asked him, what do you think this writing? Can you compare with any writing of the Nalanda masters? And he told that not only it can be compared with some of those Nalanda masters, it can be compared with one of those top Nalanda masters. And then when we come to the Tantra, then he, of course, many books he wrote, but there is Zorin Ringa something, the clear ring Sultan, the Lamb clearly explaining the five stages. And again, that is another that he has explained some of the most difficult points of clear light, illusory bodies that no one has explained before. In terms of writings, if you see so anyway, so those two are regarded as from Sutra point, Tantra point, that, and then also this text. And this was written much later, and it is, and as we go through, you can see from also at the end of the verses that he talked about, even though he was born in a Buddhist family and he had taken refuge to the Buddha from early age, and even he has a faith to the Buddha Shakyamuni, but his faith become unshakable, unreversible, really very strong after he have realization of this dependent originations. That completely kind of, the faith, is like going from this stage to that stage when he had that realizations. And it is said that this was composed after he had that realizations. And it is mentioned in the biography that he wanted to go to study to India because he felt that, maybe in order to understand the Prasangika point of view and more subtlety of that, the Madhyamika middle way school subtleties, he felt like he need to go to the India, but then, he was asked by the Manjushri, he don't need to go, he can continue to study, and that Manjushri could also help him in that. And at the very beginning, he didn't have direct connection with Manjushri himself, but he had one teacher, Lama Umaba. From very young age, he has this vision of Manjushri, black Manjushri, and he is able to communicate. From very young age, he had that kind of ability. And so at the very beginning, Lama Tsongkhapa used to communicate through the medium, through his teacher, Lama Umaba. And later it is mentioned that Lama Tsongkhapa also would have the direct visions, and then he was able to communicate directly himself. So anyway, in one of those conversations, he was told he doesn't need to go to India. He can continue to study, and Manjushri will help in whatever. And then in one of those, Lama Tsongkhapa asked whether his understanding of emptiness was according to the middle way schools. And to his disappointment, it was said, no, your understanding or realization of emptiness is not up to the Madhyamika, the middle way school, the highest. And so then he asked, what should I do to have the direct realization of the subtle emptiness according to the Madhyamika Prasangika? And so he advised, combine practice of, purification, accumulations, and then see the Guru and deity as one and do the Guru Yoga supplications and continue to study and meditate. And so with that advice, even though at that time he has thousands of students and he was teaching, and so he left all this and he went in a retreat with 8 of disciples. And also those 8 disciples were also helped by Manjushri, specifically which disciple he should take. So there were 8 of them, and with all of them, then they went and they did in one area, Woga Chulung, where they did all this practice, and then as well as continue to meditate and practice. And then he said in a dream, then he dreamed of, Buddha Shakyamuni, then Manjushri, then Buddha Shakyamuni and the Nagarjuna and all that. And then he saw someone little bit dark face, who's called Buddha Palita. And then that in that dream, that Buddha Palita gave him one text. And it was the writing of the Buddha Palita. And the next morning, he woke up from that dream, and next morning, he opened the book, which he had studied many times and contemplated many times. And when he started to again re-study and contemplate, and that is when he had that realizations, and then after he had that realizations of understanding the meaning of emptiness as a dependent arising and the meaning of dependent arising as an emptiness. In the subtle dependent arisings, through understanding subtle dependent arisings, leading to understanding of emptiness, and understanding the meaning of emptiness as the subtle dependent arising. And when he had that experience, direct experience, it blew his mind. It blew his mind. It's one of the biggest aha moment, enlightened moment. And that is when he felt so much faith and devotion to the Buddha Shakyamuni that this is the teacher who explained that, able to explain that, to have that experience. And that is when he composed that in the praise to Buddha Shakyamuni. So this is praise to the Buddha Shakyamuni from a point of view of having understood and explained the dependent arising. So that what is that? So that is, and this is very short in terms of the words, but it's very profound. Short, very, very profound. And not only the practitioners of the Gelug lineage kind of, hold very highly but even from all other lineage, within the Tibetan, who have also read or that, they all, all the lineage, they all are also very highly praised Lama Tsongkhapa's this work, as well as the three principal aspects of path. Not only in Gelu, also in Kagyu, Nyingma, Sakya, many other masters of different lineage have also wrote commentary to that, and they teach this, to their disciples. And there was one very famous recent time, on Nyingma Lama, very famous in Tibet. He passed away some years ago. Yeah, and he teach a lot, three principal aspects of path in this, actually mostly that later part of his life. And then his disciples, who are also now, they also teach, even though this is from different lineage, but they have such a high regard for this text, these compositions. They continue to teach that very often. So anyway, that is the little bit about the author and how this text came into, how it was composed, when it was kind of composed. So a little bit of kind of his story. So in Praise to Dependent Originations by Lama Tsongkhapa, then like every text, it starts with homage, Namo Guru Menju Goshaya. So here is paying homage to the Menju Gosha, Menju Shri, is same synonymous. So paying homage to the Guru Menju Shri. So again, in one way, Menju Shri was not only deity, but also guru from whom he received teachings. At the very beginning indirectly and later directly as well. Also with that, not only paying the homage to the Menju Shri, also all other gurus from whom he studies and practice, So again, with that homage, paying homage to the gurus, Menju Shri or the gurus, and then again, here Lama Tsongkhapa is kind of explaining the importance of the guru or spiritual master in our spiritual practice and path. And and remember the kindness of that. He who speaks on the basis of seeing, so the Buddha Shakyamuni, who speaks about dependent arisings, who speak about the dependent arisings without depending on others, but through his own direct experience and realizations, on the basis of seeing, or on the basis of understanding the dependent arising directly. This makes him a knower, knowing the dependent arisings. So therefore, this makes him the unexiled knower, and as well as exiled, how you say? Unexcelled teachers to teach that. I bow to you, O conqueror, you who saw the dependent origin and taught it. So here the Buddha, the author, Lama Tsongkhapa, is paying homage, respect, and bowing down to the Buddha Shakyamuni by saying that you are the unexiled knower because you understood the dependent arising that no others have understood before. And you are the unexcelled teachers where you explain clearly this dependent origin that no other teachers have explained in the past. So dependent origin, when we talk about dependent origins, there is very broad meanings. It has many different level of meanings. Dependent origin. When you talk about dependent origin or dependent arisings, it talked about something depending on something arising by depending on something. Means something, in generally, something kind of unstable, something which is impermanent, transitory. It is something exists because of, by depending on something. So when something's depending on something, or when something arises by depending on something, when that changes, then the result would change. So in that senses, then it becomes transitory, kind of impermanence or unstable in that way. Something that, so when you talk dependent arises, earlier schools of thoughts in India before Buddhism came, before Buddha came, there are many different schools of thoughts. There is one school of thoughts, Yangpemba. I don't remember the Sanskrit, Yangpemba. They believe thing comes into existence randomly. Okay? So they don't believe cause and effect or dependent origin. They think everything comes randomly. And they give examples, especially example of like when there is prawn, very pricky prawns. Why does it come? It's random. Why the peas are round, not flat? They say it's random. They say peacocks having all these colors. They say it's randoms. So their school of thoughts is that they don't believe in the cause and effect in the way we believe. So they believe in more kind of random. And so they don't believe in past and future life as well in that school of thoughts. And then there is other school of thoughts, Thangchempa. I think it's that is Chikpupa. So there is another school of thought, Thangchempa, where they believe, there is what called Chizo. Chi means the general, so is the man. And everything's come from that. Everything is manifestation or display of that Chizo, and that is permanent, you know. So therefore, again, there is that. And then another school of thoughts, Sherab, you know, they believe everything is created by the Shiva or God with their thought to create something, and then they create that, and that comes through that. And that Shiva or that God is permanent. In the same way, all other school of thoughts generally have this concept of creator God, which is permanent and absolute. Permanent, absolute, that creates. Buddhas didn't agree with that. Buddha didn't agree with that concepts. Instead, he says everything's come through dependent origins. Everything is so neither is not dependent on cause, it depends on cause. Not only it depends on cause, it depends on similar cause. It doesn't depend on permanent cause, but impermanent cause. By depending on impermanent cause, impermanent result is produced. And so therefore, such dependent arising has not been explained in any of the school of thought earlier, And that is why the Buddha's explanation dependent origin in that become the unique, and it's the unique of Buddhisms, Everything's with dependent origin. Everything comes into by depending on other factors, other conditions, cause and effect. And that was something none of the earlier teacher explained, nor other school of later teacher also explained that way. Even after Buddhism came into existence, many other spiritual path, religions came, but none of those teachers explained the concept of dependent origin, how the world and the being in the world is created by dependent origin, cause and effect. Instead, they said, create a God which is absolute and permanent, similar to the earlier school of thoughts. So that is something that those teachers didn't see that way, nor they explain that way. And when Lama Tsongkhapa had that experience, that incredible experience of that, then that is when he found how amazing this understanding and these explanations, how unique it is. And it will come, not only is it just because unique, or no one explained, but how it's related to ending our sufferings. Sometimes, of course, someone can come with different theory and idea, which is very unique, nobody has explained, but that might not be anything to do with reducing our sufferings and our delusions. So, of course, from the seed of the flower or the plant, arising the plant, sprout, and then gradually the plant, the flower, fruit, that we all see it, isn't it? Even the other school of thoughts see that. It doesn't mean that they don't see that. They don't understand that kind of cause and effect. Do you get it?
that kind of dependent origin. They see that seed, you plant that seed and you give rise to that plant with the fruit and flowers. But when you go more deeper, how did that sentient beings come into existence? How does the world come, the universe come into existence? What is the cause of the universe? What is the cause of the being in that universe? When you go deeper on that, then that is where the difference comes. You get it? That is where the difference comes. How did this universe come into existence? What created this universe to start? And the being in that universe. And the being in that universe who experience different experiences. Pain, suffering, pleasant, unpleasant, or when it comes to more on that deeper level, then that is where the different. Then different schools, some of them saying it was created by the God, and different God, they have different God, and all of them said that God, the creator, all-powerful God, is permanent and absolute, ultimate. Whereas some says, things come randomly, you don't need to have cause to produce something, it can come randomly. Then others some says, this Chiso, the main general, primary general, and which is also again permanent. And they say it comes through that creation, which is again permanent and absolute, Whereas Buddha says, the world, the universe, the world, the living beings, the sentient beings in that world or universe that experience definition, they all are due to their own corresponding cause and conditions. They all come through their own corresponding cause and conditions. It's the creations of their own cause and conditions. And that is the dependent origin. And that is where the difference is. That is where the difference is. On a fundamental level. On that fundamental level, there is the difference. On superficial, like I said, these flowers come from that seed produces this flower comes from that cause and condition, that can depend on origin, there is no differences. They also see with their own eyes. They also say that is the case. There is no difference in that. But when you go to the fundamental belief of how the universe and the living being that come into existence, what created that? That is the way the difference is. And that is where Lama Tsongkhapa was saying that is the Buddha was unexiled or unique in terms of explaining that theory, that teachings, as well as understanding and knowing that. On the basis of that, then in Buddhism, we come this concept of beginningless time. When we talk about one specific things, there's a beginning, okay? This flower has beginning, okay? But then if you talk from the point of view of the continuity of that flower, continuity of the universe, continuity of the sentient beings, if you go back, then it becomes beginningless, because the moment you say there's beginning, where did that come from? Either you have to say it's random, there's no cause, okay? And if universe or a living being, sentient beings can be exist or come into existence randomly without dependent cause, why is not repeating again? Why is not happening again and again? How can that be only one time random? No. So, or you have to say is created by God or some powerful creator. And so therefore, in Buddhism, because there's no creator, powerful God or creator who create, nor it come from randomly, there must be cause and conditions. So there must be previous cause and conditions. And you go previous cause and conditions, the moment you say this is the beginning, where does it come from? So therefore, when you use that kind of reasoning logic, as I've mentioned many times, it makes totally sense, the beginningless. If you don't use reasoning logic, if you just try to feel we like to feel there is beginning, But so anyway, so that is because of that dependent arising, it need to have, the moment you say there is a beginning, it started from here, where did that come from? How did that start it? You can say billions years or trillion years or how many ever years it started. But then where did that come from? Is there something, cause and condition before that produced that? So that dependent arising, cause and effect, is mostly, the dependent arising or dependent origin of the condition phenomena. Condition phenomena. And then there's another level of dependent origins that cover both conditioned and unconditioned phenomena, and that is that everything is dependent on its parts. Any objects or phenomena to exist, there is many parts that make that object, that phenomena. If you take away those parts, that object cannot exist as that object. That phenomena cannot exist as that phenomena and function as that phenomena if you take away these parts. So therefore, the phenomena, whatever phenomena it is, or whatever object or thing it is, in order for that object or phenomena thing to be that objects and to function that object, it depends on all the parts. So therefore, it's a dependent origin, dependent arisings, because it depends on all different parts that make that object, that thing, that phenomena. Again, when it comes to that, then there is slightly different among some of the Buddhist school of thoughts or tenets or school of thoughts. The first two school of thoughts, Vāvāsiga and Sautrantika, they believe there is a partless particles and partless consciousness. If you go further and further, there is a particle, it is so partless and it's so small that you cannot break into two more anymore. Since you cannot break into two more, any of that is partless. And consciousness similarly in that way. And that is through coming together of many of those partless particles, then it creates the mass, the parts, from very small atom particles to bigger and bigger, coming together of many of those partless particles. Okay? So therefore, even though they accept dependent origin of the conditioned phenomena, such as the cause and effect. But then they would say this, such as this partless, is not dependent arisings, because they are not dependent, it's parts. Whereas the other schools, such as minority school and middle way school, negate that and say it's not partless. It's still, it has parts. Even though it is so small, you cannot break into two more, make it two. You cannot break physically into two, but still there's a part, is south side, north side, west side, east side, upside, downside. The north side, the east side doesn't touch the west side doesn't touch north and east and west, north and south, and up and down. And of course, therefore, it is still direction, there is a directional parts. So it is still depending on that directions parts for that to be that part and function as that. So therefore, it's still, no matter how small it is still dependent origin. It still depends on its part. It still have parts, and therefore it's not absolute. Whereas the other two schools, who believe that is the partless, they think that this bigger mass, made out of many of those particles, is a conventional, is not absolute, but that partless one is absolute. They believe that is the absolute. Whereas that notion is kind of refuted by the Mahayana school of thoughts. Okay, and so from Mahayana school of thought, so even that is dependent arising, because it's dependent on its parts. And then most importantly, also everything's, all the object, all the phenomena dependent origin, dependent arising, because it's dependent on the mind thought that perceive the objects and that impute the objects as it is. Without that mind perceiving that objects and imputing that object cannot exist. And that is where subtlety comes. That is where difficult point comes. The first level of dependent arising is not so difficult to understand. Cause and effect. It's not such a difficult concept to understand, because it is not only, even with our eyes, we can see that. But compared to that, depending on its parts, it's a little bit more difficult. And especially when we talk about that most smallest particles of consciousness, when we talk about that, to understand that is dependent on its directional, there is a directional part, and how it is dependent on directional part is much more difficult to understand that kind of dependent origin than the first one. And the last one, that how everything, all phenomena, all objects, all things exist by depending on the mind. The mind, the mind to perceive and impute as that objects on the basis, and again, depending on the mind that perceive and impute or label as that objects on the basis. That is the most subtle and most difficult to understand and realize, and that's where a lot of difficulty comes. That is where the difficulties, that is where the difference between the different school of thought, even in Buddhism, as well as even our own experience. That's where we struggles. To say this cup is merely imputed by my mind, that there's no cup if there is no mind that perceive that and impute that cup. That is very difficult. We struggle that. because for us, because of our previous imprint is so strong, even when you use reason and logic, even sometimes reason and logic makes sense, but in terms of our experience, still feel, no, it is just not my mind, regardless whether it is the mind that perceives it or not. There is a cup from objectively from its own side. That is the difficult point of understanding dependent arisings. And and only when we have that understanding of subtle dependent arising, then, through that, then we can have the understanding of emptiness, correctly, unmistakably. Because you understand, it exists on merely label, merely imputations. Because you understand it exists on merely label, merely imputations by the mind, by the thought, by the concept. Because you understand it exists, so therefore you don't end up having nihilism, that there is nothing. Do you get it? Here, because you understand is merely label. It exists by merely label. And since you understand is merely label, that means what merely here means that it does not exist from its own side. That it does not exist objectively from its own side. Otherwise, it would not be merely. It would, so that merely negate that merely ideas or understanding negate that object existing from its own side objectively. So when you have understanding, any object exists by on merely level, and that is when you find the middle way without falling into any of the two extremes. Otherwise, normally we tend to, either we see the object exist from its own side objectively, or when we negate that, then again it seems that we are negating everything and seems like there is no existence. And so that is not being able to see the middle way that is free from both extreme at the same time. So that is so therefore that is why in one of the Sutra of Dependent Origin, the Buddha says, whoever sees dependent origin will see the Dharma, and whoever sees the Dharma will see the Tathagatas, the Buddhas. And meanings, we can kind of take it in two ways. One meaning is whoever sees the dependent origins, cause and effect. When you understand cause and effect, you understand the concept of karma of cause and effect. If you create a negative karma, you engage in negative karma, the cause, the result will be an unpleasant pain, suffering, samsara. On the other way, if you engage into a positive karma, in the virtuous actions, in the virtuous path, the result will be positive, joy, happiness, liberations. When you understand that, due to understanding that dependent origin, the law of cause and effect, then you try to, minimize or abandon creating any kind of negative karma. You will try to engage into a virtuous positive karma. Through that, then you actualize the Dharma within your mind. Through that actualizing the Dharma, through the practice by abandoning all the negative karma and the causes or origin that lead to negative karma, the delusion and the obscurations, and by engaging in the virtue, the path, then you achieve the Tathagata state, the Buddha state. And that is how you achieve that. So, or, when you understand the subtle dependent origin, when you understand the subtle dependent origin or dependent arising, then you have it lead to a correct understanding, realization, the emptiness correctly, unmistakably, and through understanding of, that understanding, that wisdom realizing the emptiness directly is the Dharma, and through actualizing that Dharma within yourself, that is supported by the method, the loving kindness, compassion, bodhicitta mind, then you are able to achieve the Tathagata, the Buddhahood. So that is where Buddha in that sutta where he said, one who ever understands the dependent origin will understand or see the Dharma, and whoever sees and understands Dharma will see the Tathagata, meaning achieve the Tathagatas. Mm. Mm. Okay, so maybe so then why is the understanding of dependent origin so important and unexiled? Why is explaining of the dependent origin so important and unexiled? Why is dependent origin, dependent arising so important? Why is it so important? Why is it so important to understand and realize that? Why is it so important to understand and realize that? So then that is where it relates with the next verse. Whatever degenerations there are in the world, the root of all this is ignorance. And you taught the Buddha that it is a dependent origin, the seeing of which will undo this ignorance. And so he's saying it's so important because we all want happiness and nobody wants sufferings. We all wish to be happy and we all wish to be free from suffering. Nobody wants sufferings. Despite that, not only we don't wish suffering, we wish happiness, even we put effort to be happy and not to suffer. Despite that, we continue to experience a lot of pain, a lot of sufferings, a lot of challenges, difficulties, unwanted circumstances, events, experiences. Why does those happen? Why is that? Why does that happen? Even we do not wish. So here, it is in Buddhism, the Buddha taught it all happens because of your unsubdued mind. It all arises because of your unwholesome actions, which is due to your own undisciplined mind of afflicted emotions, and which are rooted in the ignorance. Which are rooted in the ignorance. Why are we still in samsara? We don't want to be in samsara, but why do we are in samsara? We continue to be in samsara, we continue to experience suffering in samsara endlessly because of our own unwholesome actions, which are created because of our own delusions or afflictive emotions. And those delusions, afflictive emotion arises because we haven't get rid of ignorance and those delusions which are rooted in the ignorance. And as long as there is ignorance, the delusion will continue to arise. As long as there is a delusions, you will continue to suffer. You will continue to create unwholesome actions that produce suffering in samsara. So therefore, if we want to end the suffering and the problem and pain and samsara, not temporarily but permanently, then we have to, get rid of the cause that lead to that, to abandon those unwholesome actions. To abandon unwholesome actions, you have to eliminate those afflictive emotions which lead to those unwholesome actions. In order to eliminate those afflictive emotions, you have to cut the very root of that, the ignorance. And the wisdom relies on dependent origin is the actual antidote towards cutting that ignorance, the root of all delusions. Therefore, understanding dependent arising becomes so important. You want to get rid of your delusions permanently. So that is what has been explained. And again, if we try to apply in our own experiences, when we look in our own life, when we suffer, when do we suffer most? When we become unhappy, when our mind is not in good state. That is the main thing. Sometimes certain people have physical challenges or other conditions, but because their mind is in good state, still they can be happy. They can feel discomfort, physically discomfort. Maybe they have some health issue, that is discomfort. Maybe they have conditions, they don't have air conditions when it's too hot. Maybe they don't have, heat when it's too cold, and those different conditions. And they might feel physically discomfort with all of that, but still they can be very happy. Their life can be very happy because of their state of mind. So when do we become unhappy and suffer very much? when it's not just a physical discomfort. More than that is our state of mind that make us really dissatisfied, really unhappy, really miserable, really painful. And those conditions make it worse because your mind cannot deal with that. Your mind is unable to deal with that. And so, therefore, we can see with our experience more than the physical is coming from our mind, whether we become happy or miserable in our life. We see in the world around us, some people physically they have a lot of challenges, but still you find happy. Some of them quite happy, less complain, less miserable. You see many people in the world who have very little with all this physical comfort, but still in their life, generally they are quite happy, satisfied. You see many of them, different part of the world. On the other hand, we see in, again, many people who have all these physical, physical conditions, all the conditions to make physical comfort. And they have all the physical comfort. When they are too hot, they can turn it cold. When it's too cold, they can make it hot. And if the bed is too stiff, they can buy a soft one. And they can change all of that, but still very unhappy, very miserable in their life. Always complaining, always not happy, always dissatisfied, miserable. These are very clear, it's very clear we see that the miserable or happiness coming from your mind, mostly from your mind. So, and why do we become so unhappy and miserable and, so dissatisfied? Why we become so unhappy? Why our mind becomes so unhappy, so dissatisfied, so miserable, so painful due to those afflicted emotions, due to those afflicted emotions, due to those afflicted emotions. Anger. Sometimes anger is the cause that makes us very unhappy, miserable, frustrated, agitated, disturbed. Sometimes it's the attachments, due to strong attachments, craving, desire, never satisfied, no matter how much we have, still feel we don't have enough, feeling this sense of dissatisfied, unhappy, Mm. Even though we have so much, but we still feel we have so little. When you have a strong desire, greediness, that desire, that attachment has no limit. And so therefore, even you have so much, that desire, that attachment, that craving, make you feel you have so little, not enough, and you have so little. And that feeling that you have so little, that you have not enough, that make you unhappy, dissatisfied, discontent. Of course, that discontent, dissatisfied, we are not only talking about material things. It could be many other things. Sometimes you might not feel that same to material, but you might feel with your reputations, fames, or people liking you or not liking you, all those different things, they're worldly concerns, basically. And due to that, that is why we are so unhappy, And so when we are unhappy, when we are miserable, when our mind is so agitated, disturbed, that's when we engage in much more unwholesome, unhealthy actions. That brings harm and hurt to others and oneself. Through such actions, we suffer more suffering in the future as well. So we suffer immediately the moment we have those negative feelings, thoughts. That very moment, we feel very unhappy, disturbed, agitated, dissatisfied, all of that. But not only that, on the basis of such mind, then we act. We engage in actions, either mental actions, verbal actions, physical actions, or one of them, two of them, three of them. On the basis of that, and those actions that hurt and harm others and oneself, then again we experience, as a result of that actions, more pain and suffering in the futures. And that is where the suffering comes. Problem, So mainly coming from attachments and anger. And that attachment, anchors, arises from the ignorance. Both of them are rooted in the ignorance. According to Prasangya point of view, there seems to be some little kind of differentiation that they talk about. The gross level of the attachment and anger, gross level of attachment and anger arise from the ignorance. But very subtle level of attachments, anger, actually they come together with almost like simultaneously with the ignorance. And that is why it becomes more difficult to even eliminate it, the subtle ones. So anyway, whatever, but basically those delusions are very much rooted in the ignorance. And again, this is very meditation. When we talk about meditations, there are so many different one of meditation regarded to this one is that we actually try to see when we are unhappy, when our mind is disturbed, when our mind is agitated, when our mind is impatient, frustrated, when our mind is dissatisfied, when our mind is miserable. Try to see where does that come from. Try to see. At the very beginning, first we might think, because someone says something to me, or because of the weather, or because of, what I heard in the news, or because of what I saw something. But then you go deeper than that. That might be just a kind of the conditions, but more than that. If my mind is not attached to something, if my mind is not angry, would that affect me in the same way that is affecting me? That guy is being crazy, okay, with his actions, what he says, what he does. But if I don't have a bad feeling towards that, would that really upset me the way it upset me and disturb me? I might not agree with that actions, such harmful actions, but would that disturb my mind the way it's disturbing my mind? Would that mind agitate the way, would it make so miserable the way it is making me now? If you really check it, if you don't have resentment, anger, grudges, that we might not feel the way so miserable the way we feel at the moment. Yes, we have concern, we will have a concern, will not be so excited and feel great, nor will be so miserable and agitated and upset the way we feel at the moment. Of course, why we are unhappy, that person's actions, behavior, what he says, whatever that is. But really more than that, is our state of mind. That is like just putting little kind of matches, but it is there. If there is no candle, the matches doesn't light the light. The matches is there, but still you cannot light. To light that, there is a candle, and that candle, with that candle, there is the matches, and then that happens. And same with other things, when we feel so down, depressed, and all different kind of negative emotions. Again, of course, we can have some superficial cause or condition that lead to that, but more than that, and if you go deeper, then again, it's because of our state of mind. Because maybe we have strong attachment, we wanted something so desperately, and all of that, and then when that doesn't happen, then it hit us very badly. And that makes you feel bad about yourself or many other things. Because we're attached to certain things that you wanted, whether certain situations or certain experience, whatever that is. So it is important to really recognize, not because Buddha said, Nagarjuna says, Lama Tsongkhapa said, books, of course, in there they say, but we take that and then we analyze with our own experience. Meditations is what we do at home and see what they say, is that true or not? And applying yourself. And through that applying, then you come to convictions. Oh, it's not that they said, but it's the reality, it's the truth. And as truth is not because they said it's truth, because you have experimented yourself. You have done the exercise yourself and you understood with your own experience directly. And that is one part of the meditations that we try to, and then, the teachings these teachings then become real, transformative, that we are not talking about something outside there that is happening. It's talking about our own experience. It's talking about our own experience instead of talking about something out there. At the moment, sometimes when we listen and when we read, it feels like we are watching a movie somewhere there. Instead of seeing it is what is my experience. This is what my experience. And so when we see it's more like watching outside, then it's hard to have that transformations. And the teaching doesn't become so real to us and effective. So I think so that is whatever degeneration there are in the world, the root of all this is ignorance. So that is where we're talking about. So I think that is something you can do. There's some meditation, analyze yourself at home, not just you heard it, not just we saw it, but actually analyzing with your own experience and seeing whether that my unhappiness or whatever, whether that is rooted in one of those delusions, and whether that delusion is rooted in either attachment or anger, and whether those attachment and anger are rooted in ignorance or not. That is the exercise meditations. Okay. So any questions I can take? If there's question, I can take one or two, not too many.
Any
No,
questions?
then we do the
Any
dedication.
online?
Doesn't look like it. No.
Is there one? No.
Nope,
Then we
there's
do
none.
the.
Looks like we understand emptiness, Geshe.
Hmm?
Looks like we understand emptiness.
That is wonderful. So I'm happy with that. So we do the dedication.
Malupa De Salam Verbasho Chang Chup Sem Chorin Poche Ma Ke Panam Ke Gyuchi Ke Wanyam Pa Me Pa Ya Gong Ne Gong Du Pe Washo Angri Rawe Kurwe Jinkam Dir Pendang Dewa Malu Jumwe Den Chenre Zingwang Tenzin Gatsoi Jape Site Bardu Tengyuchi. Prayer for swift return of Lama Zopa Rinpoche, peerless teacher and assembly of the children of the victorious ones, Sravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, victorious Losang father and sons, along with the lineage masters, all the objects of refuge of infinite lands, please bestow the virtue and goodness of accomplishing this prayer here and now, holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice. We wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable Venerable Guru, to you I make request. While striving single-pointedly for the sake of the victorious one's teachings, the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, and for other living beings, you suddenly departed to peace. What a great loss. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the blessings of the ocean of the three jewels, and the great waves of bodhicitta of the children of the victorious ones, may the smile of a reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for fortunate disciples. And we don't have it, but long life prayer for Khenche Rinpoche Lot Jetsun Lobsang Delek, the one who mastered his speech at a very young age, the one with great patience who received the name Avatare, the one with great precision who spread the teachings of Lama Tsongkhapa on bliss and void, Lama, ornament of the yellow hat tradition, please remain until samsara ends. And please hold Geshe-la's long life in your hearts.
That might be a problem. What you ask, you have to be careful. Okay. You say for my long life. That was, I was just making. That might be a good one.